Yeah, I mean, I think that Gabriel is a guy that has a natural feel for the position. I think he's got subtle and nuanced pocket movement, which you don't see from a lot of college quarterbacks.
You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Monster Monday presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. We got Greg Cosell in the house. Couldn't wait till Wednesday or Thursday for the Civilian Goat. Wanted to get his thoughts on some of the more interesting draft choices over the weekend, ASAP, for all of you, and selfishly for myself as well. There is some interesting news to get to as well after Greg, whether it relates to these prank calls that some of the draft picks received, which, boy, really bugs me quite a bit. And then we got some veterans that have signed contracts that kind of went under the radar, right? Tyler Lockett with the Panthers, or the Titans, I'm sorry. The Panthers signing Hunter Renfrow, Jags signing Emmanuel Ogbah. We'll get to that stuff a little bit later in the show. Remember, every week we've got new winners. I like sending you guys signed stuff in the mail. I like it because those are those of you that are doing a little extra for the show. So just do anything with @RossTuckerPod on any social media platform, a comment, a reply, whatever, or take advantage of any of the sponsors you hear on the show, like the Game Time app or Huel or 100 Flowers, of course. And then you can also give us a shout out on YouTube, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL. Growing by leaps and bounds there every week. Love those of you that want to check us out via video. Again, youtube.com/RossTuckerNFL. Just make sure you subscribe and turn the notifications on. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
Okay, Greg. This is always an interesting show, right? Because I'm not going to go through every pick with you. I'm not going to say, hey, Greg, what do you think about Cam Ward? Like, we've talked about Cam Ward. We knew the Titans were going to take Cam Ward. We know those things. I'm just going to go over some of the ones that I thought were more interesting. Okay. And I'm kind of curious to get your opinion on. Let's start with the Giants' decision to move back up into the first round for Jaxson Dart. What do you think it is about Jaxson Dart that Brian Daboll liked so much, and how do you see him fitting in Daboll's system?
I certainly don't know, Ross, what's in Brian Daboll's head, but I'll say this. I think that there's a recognition now that, and particularly for their team at this moment with offensive line issues, that they needed a quarterback that had movement ability, that had second reaction outside of structure ability. And Jaxson Dart, while he's certainly not explosive in the way you think of the great runners in the league, he is going to make plays with his legs. That's a meaningful part of his game, and he can do that. And I think that factored into the equation. And again, like I said, I don't know what Brian Daboll's thought process is about Dart as a passer. All you have when you watch players in college is you have the ability to see how they execute the offense that they're asked to execute at the college level. We can all sit here and say, well, that's not an NFL offense, whatever. I would disagree with that about Ole Miss anyway, but the point is he played for 3 years in the same system, for the most part executed better and better each year at a high level, and that ability to move and make plays outside of structure has become increasingly important in this league.
Just an observation here, Greg. Is he a better athlete than Daniel Jones was?
He may not be a straight line fast, but I think he might be a little looser. His hips might be a little oilier, so to speak.
I understand. So do you think, though, Greg, because I did the Ole Miss Alabama a couple years ago, and he can run.
Yes.
But I've always said to people, there's a difference between, like, he can run in college for some guys, and he can run and get meaningful yards in the NFL. I'll be curious to see how many, just how athletic he is at the next level.
Well,
Is
I'll
that
say
fair?
this. When it's 3rd and 7, he can run and get 9. There's no question he can do that. He may not be dynamic in that he becomes a factor in the way you structure your entire offensive approach, but he can certainly do that. I think he's a little bit better athlete than people are giving him credit for.
While we're talking about quarterbacks and a little bit better athlete than people give him credit for, I think one of the major surprises for a lot of people, obviously, Shedeur Sanders not going till the 5th round, but that the Browns took Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. Greg, the Browns took Dillon Gabriel ahead of a bunch of more highly touted quarterbacks, more talked about quarterbacks. I was always a big fan. To me, he reminded me of Tua, maybe a little bit more athletic Tua, which is what I always ask people about. Well, how are they different? They say, well, he's not as big and arm's not as strong or whatever. But can you refresh my memory on Dillon Gabriel, what the Browns must like from him to the point where they took him 2 rounds ahead of Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gabriel is a guy that has a natural feel for the position. I think he's got subtle and nuanced pocket movement, which you don't see from a lot of college quarterbacks. I think he has a pretty refined feel for when to come off intermediate route concepts and check the ball down. He rarely gets stuck in the pocket. I mean, I think you're dealing with a guy, obviously, because he was 5'11" and an eighth. He's got a little bit better arm than people are giving him credit for. He does not have a bad arm at all. What he needs at the next level, and I think in an ideal world, this is what Kevin Stefanski wants his offense to look like, is he needs a passing game built on timing and rhythm concepts, maybe an emphasis on RPO and quick game, where Gabriel can hit his back foot, deliver the ball, play action boot to clearly define reads and present cleaner throws. This is what Kevin Stefanski obviously wants his offense to look like. But I think that the arm is, it's easy to look at him and he looks small on tape. And I was truly surprised he was 5'11" and a half. I thought he might be in the 5'10" range. So again, I'm not saying he's Baker Mayfield. He certainly doesn't have an arm like Baker. But you get into this discussion, which we get into with offensive linemen as well. Is there a huge difference between 5'11" and a half and 6 feet? I mean, is that a difference where you say, well, we can draft one guy but not another guy? I don't know the answer to that, but I think he's a little bit better than people give him credit for.
What I think is interesting, Greg, with him, Cam Ward, to a lesser extent, Tyler Shuck, who we talked about a bunch in the pre-draft process, Gabriel playing really well at UCF and then at Oklahoma and then at Oregon, that says something to him in my mind, right? Like we have tangible evidence that no matter where this guy goes, Greg, he plays well. And like that's the NFL. Like you're not always going to be in the same system. You're not going to have the same coaches. I think that speaks very well of a guy like him and Cam Ward to go to that many stops and still play at a high level.
No, he's an executor and a ball distributor, and he actually has a little better athleticism than you might think. I mean, he can run for a first down, but he's, like I said, the way Kevin Stefanski wants his offense to look, and it hasn't quite looked like that because of poor quarterback play in recent years, but we know what he wants his offense to look like, and Gabriel fits that model, that profile.
All right, so the next couple were interesting, right? There was a lot of talk during the pre-draft process that T-Mac, Tet McMillan from Arizona, was falling, whatever that means. You were very clear that you liked him a lot. And then that Golden was rising, and Golden ran the 4.28, and we know that. Well, then the draft comes. The Panthers take T-Mac at 8, and Golden doesn't go till the Packers at 23. The question I have on that, Greg, is it as simple as saying T-Mac is a better receiver, better prospect than Golden, or is some of this like, man, they are very different body types, very different guys, and Dave Canales probably looks at T-Mac and says, this guy can be my Mike Evans in Carolina?
Yeah, and I think the other factors you have to think about your quarterback. I mean, Bryce Young, obviously is a quarterback that did play better toward the end of last season, but the nature of the way in which he plays and the fact that he is smaller and he does face pressure, you want a bigger receiver because Bryce Young at this point in time is not necessarily a precision thrower that's going to put it right on your hands. But McMillan, to me, and I think we spoke about him when we did receivers, I personally think he's a little bit better than people talk about. I mean, the comparison everybody made, and I heard it this weekend again, was Drake London. I think he's better than Drake London. Now, we won't know that till he's in the league, but I think that he's really good run after catch. I think he made seamless transitions from receiver to runner. He had deceptive quickness with the ball in his hands. I think he can line up anywhere. He's got phenomenal hands. We know because he's 6'4" and 1/8 that he has a wide catching radius. Obviously he's not a 4.4 guy. I think he ran a 4.55 at his pro day, but he plays faster than that, and he's smooth. And I think that, look, I'm not sitting here saying he's Justin Jefferson, but I think the way in which he plays to me on tape is more like that than Drake London. And I know people listening are going to say, what are you, nuts? I'm not saying he's Justin Jefferson, but I think there's more to his game than just being a big possession receiver. That would be my ultimate point.
Ooh, that's interesting. I like that. Sometimes if a guy is really big, you just put him in that category. We love to put him in categories. Well, He's a really big dude, so put him in that category.
Exactly, yeah.
Are you surprised at all, Greg, with the Packers going with Matthew Golden? It feels like the Packers have a bunch of receivers. Feels like they have a bunch of guys like Watson and Jalen Reed that can run. I mean, evidently, maybe they're sick of Watson getting hurt, or maybe they just feel like you can never have enough. Just curious your thoughts on the Packers taking Golden.
That would, again, we don't know what their draft board looks like, Ross, but that to me smacks of they had Golden rated high. Maybe they had him in their top 12 on their draft board, and it just got to pick, 22 or 23? It was right around there, right? And they just probably felt like, hey, we have this guy rated really highly. He's sitting right there. We need to take him. Sometimes that happens. I mean, you look at the Eagles. Howie Roseman came right out and said we had Jihaad Campbell as a top 10 player on our board, and they were able to get him at 31. Sometimes if you have a player rated really highly and he's sitting there, you just take him. You don't think about position or anything like that. You take the player you have rated highly. We don't know that. They're not going to, maybe they'll come out and say that. Maybe they won't. But that was my sense when they took Golden.
Interesting. You mentioned Campbell, and since you did, I'm going to ask you about that. I think there's always a level of skepticism when a guy goes 31 and the GM says we had him as a top 10 player. It's interesting, though, because Wednesday's show, I don't know if you know Derek Klassen, from at QB Class. He was on the show last week, and the day before the first round, he said his favorite non-quarterback was Jihaad Campbell. Felt like he was a top 5 player in the draft. We don't know the health stuff, Greg, but can you see why the Eagles had him as a top 10 player? What do you think he is, and can you see that? Because, when people hear that, it's like, okay, then why didn't the 17th team take him or the 23rd team take him?
Well, now I think, Ross, you get into not only the player, and clearly he's a phenomenal athlete who gives you multiplicity with his ability to be a stack backer, which is his core position, but he's also a pass rusher because he went to Alabama as a pass rusher, and they moved him to stack backer because they had Dallas Turner and Will Anderson. He's a terrific pass rusher. But now you have to think about team and scheme. Linebackers, stack backers are critical in a Vic Fangio scheme. For this reason, they do not want their safeties in their too high structure coverages in their quarters foundation to have to drop down and be underneath defenders. They want their safety to stay as umbrella players in coverage. So linebackers are absolutely critical in coverage. They may be as important to Vic Fangio as any coach in the league. And Campbell has tremendous length, tremendous athleticism. I guarantee they see him as a guy that with coaching and with time And by the way, Nick Saban, and even though he didn't play for Saban this past year, but Nick Saban had a lot of quarters principles in his concept, so it's probably something Campbell is somewhat familiar with. So I think it's the player being so highly athletic, he's an uber athlete, and the scheme fit with Vic Fangio.
Interesting. Okay. One of the other ones that jumped out to me, Greg, and a lot of people, and in fact, I know a lot of Bears fans that aren't happy about it, was the Bears taking Colston Loveland at 10 instead of Tyler Warren. I have my own opinion as to why they did that, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on why the Bears might have taken Loveland instead of Tyler Warren, the two tight ends.
Again, I think it's player fit and scheme fit. We can sit here and debate Tyler Warren, and he's obviously very gifted, but in many ways, Cole Kmet is Kyler Warren. Now, he may not be as good as Tyler Warren in terms of physical and athletic traits, but he fits that role. He was looking for a receiving tight end, a seam stretcher. He was looking for that kind of player. And say what you want, but Loveland is a more explosive, dynamic mover than Warren when it comes to being able to work at the intermediate and vertical levels. Loveland falls, he's not as good, but he falls into the Brock Bowers category more so than Warren does. So clearly they were looking for that as opposed to Warren, who to me, ultimately, and I love Warren, by the way, ultimately falls more, if he reaches his true potential, falls more into like the George Kittle kind of player, which is phenomenal, but that's different than the Brock Bowers kind of player, which I think Loveland falls more into that kind of category.
Interesting. Okay. What about one of the more fascinating trades of the first round? Falcons really made a big move.
Yeah.
To come back up in the first round and get James Pearce and trade next year's first round pick. That was eye-opening for a lot of people, especially, by the way, after they had already drafted Jalen Walker. And I think they might have announced Jalen Walker as an edge, which they did. They announced Jalen Walker as an edge. And you had said, Greg, his best thing was pass rushing. So they take him at 15, announce him as an edge. Then they come back and trade with the Rams next year's first round pick to get James Pearce Jr. Is he worth it? You know, especially as a second edge. What do you think of Pearce?
Well, I think Pearce has everything you look for in an edge player. And again, I think that when you watch his tape, you see everything you want to see. You could easily make the argument that he could have been drafted higher, because you're dealing with a guy that's a high-level athlete. He's got suddenness. He's got twitch. There are times he showed speed to power. I think that remains a little bit of a work in progress. But this guy has what you want as an edge player. So that was something they could not do last year, was rush the quarterback. And I think in a Raheem Morris defense, and obviously it'll be his defense, even though Ulbrich is the coordinator, certainly as of today anyway, I think that he would like to be able to rush the quarterback with 4 and play in coverage with 7. And you're right about Jalen Walker. I mean, the best thing he does is rush the quarterback. So I'm very curious to see if they line him up as a stacked backer. I'm not sure they will. I think they might see him purely as an edge. That is what he does best.
One of the other draft picks that jumped out to me, we talked about him, but I don't know that we talked about him maybe as much as we should have. And that's the Bills drafting Maxwell Hairston, the corner, out of Kentucky. I don't remember hearing that much about him, Greg, till he ran that 4.2 at the Combine, which always makes me a little bit skeptical. You know, I heard more about Will Johnson and Benjamin Morrison, and then, he runs this 40. How does Hairston fit what the Bills do? What do you think of him?
Yeah, I liked Hairston a lot. I watched him last summer from 2023 when he played essentially the full season. He did get hurt this year. Maybe that's why, he wasn't talked about a lot until the Combine. But I think you're dealing with a guy that really understood how to play in zone coverage. And you know how critical that is for Sean McDermott. I thought he understood the mandates of zone coverage with pattern recognition, spatial awareness. One thing in zone, you hear coaches talk about this all the time, is you've got to minimize the stress areas, the conflict areas that are inherent in zone. Obviously, the coaches say, we don't want any stress areas. We want to make sure we take care of them. But you and I know, Ross, and every coach knows that in zone, there are going to be voids, so you're trying to minimize that. And I think that Hairston had a really good feel for the conflict areas and different zone coverages. He's capable of playing press. The Bills are not a big press man team, but you have to be able to play press in this league, and I think he has the ability to do that. But I think you're dealing with a guy that can run. In an ideal world, they would like him to be the starter opposite Benford. We'll see how that plays out.
One of the other draft choices that I wanted to ask you about was Terrance Ferguson, the tight end from Oregon that went to the Rams. We didn't really talk a whole lot about him. Mason Taylor was the third tight end off the board. He went to the Jets. A few picks later, the Rams took Terrance Ferguson ahead of a guy I know you really liked in Elijah Arroyo from Miami. So I guess I'm curious, Greg, what do you think the Rams saw from Ferguson that they liked more than Arroyo?
Well, can I tell you what my last line in my transition was when I did Ferguson, Ross? Here's what I typed. I think a good comparison would be Tyler Higbee, the way he is deployed in the Rams offense. So maybe they saw it the same way. I said Ferguson, depending on team and run and pass game concepts, could develop into a tight end one who is schemed in space as a receiver. He is a linear athlete, so you want to get him the ball on the move, and you deploy him as a movement angle leverage blocker in the run game. So I very much saw him like Tyler Higbee, because Tyler Higbee was predominantly a split receiver when he came out of Western Kentucky. But that was my comparison. And, hey, I'm certainly not as smart as Sean McVay, but maybe they saw the same thing.
Wow, I love that. Greg, terrific work as always. Looking forward to next week. We'll get back into it. Check him out on social at Greg Cosell. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Ross. Appreciate it.
So you guys know how I feel about Mother's Day. It is arguably the most important holiday of the year. Definitely for your mom, definitely for your grandma, and honestly, pretty much for your significant other as well, if you guys have kids. And no matter what, they want flowers. In particular, they want roses. And right now at 100flowers.com, when you order a dozen roses, they'll double it to 2 dozen free. Think about how blown away they'll be when you give them double the flowers, double the roses. To claim your double your roses offer, go to 100flowers.com/Ross. That's 100flowers.com/Ross. I don't even know how long I've been with 100 Flowers at this point. Like over a decade. The OGs know I've been with 100 Flowers forever, and I still get it for everybody every holiday. 100flowers.com/Ross. All right, Super Bowl's over, draft's over. Now you got to get yourself some Smirnoff and get ready to follow your team through summer training, because next season is right around the corner. You heard it all season long. The fun doesn't stop now. Smirnoff knows there's no I in football. It is a we thing, an experience best enjoyed together. Good drinks, good folks, home or away, we rally together. We cry together, we do everything together. Smirnoff is the world's #1 vodka and official vodka partner of the NFL. It's also award-winning vodka. Grab a bottle of Smirnoff at your local retailer and head to Smirnoff.com to find recipes of delicious cocktails perfect for game day. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff #21 vodka. Distilled from grain, 4% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, the biggest note from the weekend, there were multiple draft picks that were prank called during the draft. That included Shedeur Sanders, and it was Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbricht's son, Jax, who has apologized both publicly and directly to Shedeur.
I'm going to make this my Labatt take of the week, Jack, brought to you by Labatt. With Labatt, you can buy beer, get gear, go to their website, snap a photo of your receipt, upload it to gain points towards exclusive merch, any size, any product, anywhere you're buying Labatt. Sign up at rewards.labattusa.com. I look at things like this so differently now. I would be so disappointed if I were Jax Ulbrich's father. Now, listen, I'm not criticizing Jeff. I know Jeff, maybe he's a terrific father. Maybe he's taught Jax well, and Jax just decided to do his own thing. But, to ruin a moment that these guys, because it sounds like he might have been doing it to other players like Tyler Warren as well, but to ruin a moment like this for these guys and their families that have worked their entire life for this, it's not funny. And then they recorded it themselves and posted it. The mindset of some people these days when it comes to doing things to try to get attention on social media is really, really scary.
Some non-draft news. Kerby Joseph, he signed a gigantic contract extension with the Lions.
He did, and that really went under the radar that I think people, lost sight of. He's the highest paid safety in NFL history now. He's coming off a fantastic season. Very deserving, by the way, of that contract. But this is the way the Lions like to roll. The interesting thing for the Lions now will be when and how they sign Aiden Hutchinson. But Kerby Joseph, it was the day before the draft, so it totally went under the radar, but kudos to him.
Some post-draft transactions. The Titans, they bring in wide receiver Tyler Lockett. Hunter Renfrow is back in the league with the Carolina Panthers, and the Jags, they signed defensive end Emmanuel Ogbah.
Did you know, Jack, did you remember that Hunter Renfrow was out of the league last year?
I did, yes, because I saw the things about him being an accountant or whatever in the Carolina area. So that's how I first saw it.
He was?
Yeah, he was, or construction or recycling, something along those lines.
Did you just go from accountant to construction to recycling?
I don't know. He was on LinkedIn. That's what people saw. So my mind just goes to business people on LinkedIn. I don't know.
I can't believe you just went accountant, construction, recycling. Anyway, there will be more of these signings now that it's after the draft because they don't count against the compensatory pick formula. Obviously, Hunter probably wanted to live close to home, and it makes a lot of sense to me to get Cam Ward in Tennessee, a young or a receiver like Tyler Lockett that he can rely on in the slot. That makes absolute perfect sense. Like that move quite a bit by the Tennessee Titans. But again, that kind of went under the radar as well. Other than that, I think we're done here. Hopefully you guys saw Saturday I was at Penn State's blue-white game doing what I do. Drink Labatt Blue. That rhymes. That was awesome, actually. I didn't even expect that. Anyway, I love this promotion they got going. Buy beer, get gear. It's incredible. When you buy Labatt Blue anywhere, take a picture of the receipt, upload it, rewards.labattusa.com. Then you can get incredible gear. Like I got that Labatt fridge. It is awesome. Any size, any product, anywhere you're buying Labatt, buy beer, get gear. Rewards.labattusa.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com, the best Mother's Day gift ever. It's a no-brainer, myfrontpagestory.com, and I'll send you a signed autograph in the mail. Backofficescheduler.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.